Films as early as Nannook of the North, Peter Pan, and Pocahontas, through the panindianisms, unidimensional qualities, and at times outright racism, often cast Indigenous peoples into three categories of stereotypical portrayals, consisting of primitive savages, pastoral primitives, and primitive problem people. In the first, Indigenous people are represented as wild, defiant, and non-deferential, lawless. In the second, as picturesque, idealized, bucolic, and romantic. And in the third, as creating and/or having problems. These stereotypical portrayals of Indigenous peoples further reflect the colonial desire for the disappearance of the Indigenous other, and its contribution to being an instrument of colonial domination. Through an analysis of the ongoing Canadian TV series, Shoresy, and its approach to Indigenous representation within a colonial framework, the series provides a contemporary lens to examine the stereotypical portrayals created as well as perpetuated by both American and Canadian media. This analysis offers critical insights into how these narratives continue to shape and reflect Canada's current relationship with colonialism and its modern media landscape. Shoresy is a Canadian television series centered on the brash, unapologetic hockey player Shoresy, who relocates to Sudbury, Ontario to revive a struggling senior AAA hockey team, the Sudbury Bulldogs. While modern media often perpetuates colonial stereotypes in its portrayal of Indigenous peoples, Shoresy engages with these tropes in ways that both adhere
Tough natives is redundant
and subvert their traditional representational format. Through its innovative use of sharp comedy, hyperreal hybridity, intentional casting, and layered mise-en-scène, Shoresy acknowledges and dismantles these stereotypes, offering a refreshing and nuanced portrayal of Indigenous representation in Canadian media. Shoresy seamlessly integrates Indigenous cultural elements. Anishinaabe-rooted character names Zigwan, Aki, and Miigwan, as well as beadwork incorporated into costume design, seen with earrings, and Sanger's beaded medallion as coach, are a common thread in the series' visual and narrative design. These subtle yet meaningful elements demonstrate a respect for the Anishinaabe traditions, as well as add depth and complexity to the characters, acknowledging and integrating Indigenous actors and cultural references, not as tokens, but as active participants in its narrative. Furthermore, the series employs sharp and vulgar humor to challenge traditional perceptions of Canadians as polite, reserved, and overall nice. The protagonist Shoresy's brash one-liners, or chirps as we say, such as,
"Oh yeah, I remember laying in bed as a kid dreaming about reffing high school hockey on a Friday night. I remember laying in bed dreaming about the time your mom tongued my butthole so good I put her in my phone as roll up the rim to win," immediately work to dismantle this stereotype, exposing the grittier, unvarnished realities of Canadian culture. This unapologetic humor demonstrates the importance of setting the tone.
You gotta set the tone!
As well as the importance for how one approaches critiques of cultural stereotypes. The series understands that its brash comedic tone could undermine its ability to critique stereotypes if it were to approach them in a serious, heavy-handed manner. This awareness mirrors the approach seen in the Baroness von Sketch show with their skit, Theatre Acknowledgement.
Before we begin this evening's performance, we would like to acknowledge that this theatre stands on territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Petun First Nations. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to make right with all our relations. And now, please enjoy the show.
Sorry, hello?
Sorry?
Excuse me, should we go?
As seen with that short clip, the skit's humor highlights how land acknowledgement, if presented with the wrong context or without an effective approach, can come off as insincere or tokenistic.
Oh, no. The theatre is here now. We'd just like to acknowledge whose land it is.
Similarly, Shoresy recognizes that trying to tackle Indigenous stereotypes with a solemn tone would risk diluting the impact and humor of the show, as well as potentially render critiques more harmful than helpful. As a result, the series uses its fast-paced comedic tone to tackle harmful stereotypes with levity. They address the primitive savage trope with scenes like the natives in jail miscommunication, where they address the common stereotypes of natives being lawless and violent criminals.
We're almost there.
You're going to jail.
For what?
That's where our tough natives are.
Our tough natives are in jail?
Tough natives is redundant
They work there, Shoresy.
Well, you made it sound like they were in jail.
That is so racist.
No, it isn't.
You see, that's the problem right there, is that
No,
your
it
mind immediately
isn't.
goes to them being in jail.
It was
That's
a
the problem.
misunderstanding.
You're the problem. That's what's happening here, is that you're the problem.
Holy.
These moments use comedic levity to deflate these damaging narratives while inviting the viewers to reflect on the persistence of such stereotypes in Canadian culture. The series thrives on hybridity, blending authenticity with overly exaggerated stereotypes to address and dismantle them. It casts real hockey players from previous professional careers, alongside Indigenous and regional actors, ensuring a grounded yet exaggerated portrayal of Northern Ontario life. This authentic hybridity is demonstrated in the introduction to the gyms.
I'm saying
Roll call, we ready?
Yeah. Jim.
Two Jims.
Jim.
Are y'all three Jim?
This scene not only features two famous NHL brothers, Brandon and Jordan Nolan, it also addresses the stereotype of Indigenous people sharing the same name. This stereotype is rooted in the colonial impacts of European settlement and colonization. Indigenous peoples were frequently encouraged or coerced into adopting Christian names as a part of assimilation policies, which aimed to erase Indigenous cultures, languages, and identities. Names such as Mary and James, often shortened to Jim, became widely adopted and passed down through generations. While the humor of the series often flirts with offensiveness, it is carefully designed to never punch down, relying on pacing and contextual awareness to ensure that power dynamics are acknowledged and respected. The unique approach to Indigenous representation in Shoresy engages with the colonial legacies and stereotypes that continue to shape Indigenous representation in media, encouraging a deeper reflection on the broader question of whether we can truly separate ourselves from these ingrained narratives, and what steps are necessary to move toward reconciliation and a more inclusive future. This conversation then leads us to ask, can we untangle ourselves from these legacies or not? Strictly speaking, for Canadian context, I believe we can untangle ourselves from these stereotypes, and that we have already taken steps that reflect this. Such can be seen in most recent years with the increased coverage of the residential schools on Canadian broadcasting networks. As stated by the Chief Commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Honourable Murray Sinclair,
we in the Indigenous community are in a constant state of grieving, it seems sometimes, for the families that were broken, for the cultures that were torn apart, and for the children that never made it home. For you must understand that the way that you have been raised and educated has also had an impact upon you and your sense of who you are and your sense of who we are. Yes, our country's history is complicated, and it is not always easy to review. But you don't make it better by ignoring it or glossing over it. You make it better by helping carry out the calls to action, by learning, by unlearning, and by resolving to do better. Because this story is not over.
colonialism is inseparable from the dialogue of Canadian past and present. It is a complex dichotomy of identity and feelings related to our history and culture. Canada tends to focus on painting ourselves as nice, when really, we should be working towards amplifying and supporting Indigenous voices. As stated by Jeff Barnaby,
we should really be focusing on all the things that we've been ignoring for the past few centuries, frankly, to bring a part of Canadian history in residential schools to the fore, and to have it as a part of the national identity, and have it in a kind of definitive discussion as a part of Canadian history, and a kind of legacy that you do not walk off or rub dirt on, and have it acknowledged, and have the victims of these schools acknowledged, and this mutually accepted ignorance as a part of history, because I feel like I've been more or less predefined by Canadian identity that I take no part in. If that makes any sense. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on Canadian cinema.
thank you.